Hey, thanks for showing up. My name is Jaxon, and this is the Spooky Hour. 60 minutes of non-stop terrifying tales. You're a bit late. Pretty much everybody already showed up, told the story, and left. But you're here just in time for mine. The most terrifying tale of all. The story of bankruptcy. The year is 2001, and THQ, as part of their licensing deal with Nickelodeon, has released the first 3 SpongeBob games ever made. Legend of the Lost Spatula, an open-ended and exploration-focused 2D platformer for the late Game Boy Color, Super Sponge, a more traditional 2D platformer for the PS1 and Game Boy Advance, and Operation Krabby Patty, a minigame collection for the PC, all of which received pretty average reviews, with critics considering them not the worst games in the world, just not very exceptional or noteworthy. But that doesn't matter because they all made bank, meaning that THQ was going to keep converting the cheese cube back into milk for all it's worth. And moving into 2002, they were gearing up to release what was easily the most ambitious SpongeBob game yet, Revenge of the Flying Dutchman. You see, with the end of 2001 came the introduction of the GameCube and the original Xbox, meaning that the 6th generation of consoles was in full swing, and Revenge of the Flying Dutchman was going to take full advantage of 2 of them. No more 2D platformers with pixel or pre-rendered graphics, no more minigame collections. This game was set to be open world, allowing you to visit every nook and cranny of Bikini Bottom, meeting the show's wide cast of characters, all fully rendered in 3D, which is something that, outside of Operation Krabby Patty, had never really been done before, at least not on this scale. It sounded like everything was in this game's favor, but behind the scenes, it was a whole other story. I'm not going to go super in-depth about the making of this game. I'd recommend you check out this video by Who Needs Normal if you want the full details, but to make a long story short, Revenge of the Flying Dutchman suffered from development hell. Developer Big Sky Interactive faced a bunch of issues during development, such as their parent company Callisto shutting down, their internal engine struggling to fulfill their vision for the game, payment disputes with THQ, but the one that really sealed the coffin for this game was when THQ offered to purchase Big Sky, an offer they refused, which is understandable considering their parent company had just shut down. But THQ didn't see it that way, because they ended up blacklisting Big Sky from the industry, meaning that they weren't able to find any more work and had to rush the final product out with little funding before closing their doors. This story isn't even scary anymore. It's just sad. All of these factors led to what was, at launch, the first SpongeBob game to have a truly negative reception. Both fans and critics blasted Revenge of the Flying Dutchman for its poorly designed gameplay, terrible cutscenes, subpar graphics, and just failing to replicate the charm of the show it was based on. However, like a lot of licensed games from this era, Revenge of the Flying Dutchman has since gained a cult following in the years since its release. It's not as big as other licensed games or even SpongeBob games of the era, but there's still a decent amount of people who will consider the game to be not that bad, an underrated gem even. So, in anticipation of the next SpongeBob movie and video game coming out later this year, both of which have the Flying Dutchman in a major role, I thought it would be only fitting to look back at the ghostly captain's first appearance in a video game. That's right, this was never about telling scary stories, and I just tricked you into listening to me talk about nerd shit. The game begins as an average morning for SpongeBob. He wakes up, gets ready for work, and takes Gary out to play fetch. It's while playing fetch that Gary brings in a mysterious old treasure chest, which SpongeBob decides to open, releasing a bunch of doubloons across town, as well as the Flying Dutchman, who's been sealed inside of a glass bottle contained in the chest for centuries. So that immediately makes this game non-canon. As punishment for getting into his treasure, the Dutchman sentences SpongeBob to work as part of his crew for the rest of eternity, and in an act of desperation, SpongeBob lets it slip that Gary was the one who dug up the chest, meaning that he's the one who should serve on the Dutchman's crew. Something that he is very relieved by, because just by looking at Gary, the Dutchman's able to tell that he'll be able to do 10 times the work SpongeBob can. Damn, that is cold. He warns SpongeBob and tells him that he'll be back to pick up Gary later before vanishing, and SpongeBob, not wanting his pet to be the Dutchman's hypnotic slave for the rest of eternity, tries to find a way to save Gary and stop the Dutchman once and for all. Getting into the gameplay, how exactly does it work? Well, let's start with the basics and cover SpongeBob's moveset. He can run, jump, ground pound, crouch, and perform a crouch jump that allows him to leap higher, everything you'd expect from a 3D platformer at the time. But in addition to those, he can also do a glide by holding the A button in midair, he can roll by pressing R while moving, he can tiptoe around enemies by pressing L while moving, and he can do a small karate chop by pressing the B button, which is pretty much useless since it stops SpongeBob dead in his tracks and has a very small hitbox. However, this isn't how SpongeBob plays for the entire game, as entering these tents scattered across the open world allows SpongeBob to access a handful of costumes that he slowly unlocks over the course of the game. There's SpongeBob's jellyfishing gear, which gives him a net that allows him to catch jellyfish and perform a special version of the karate chop with a larger hitbox. There's SpongeBob's Mermaid Man costume, which allows him to throw these water balls at enemies. That's it. There was going to be a whirlpool move you could perform in this costume, but it was cut. There's SpongeBob's reef blower from the titular episode, allowing you to blow certain objects in whatever direction you want, and making SpongeBob look like a goofball. Seriously, are you okay, SpongeBob? SpongeBob! And finally, in certain scripted sections, SpongeBob will be given karate gear or a treasure hunting outfit. The former allows SpongeBob to chain together combos and break a bunch of objects at once, and the latter allows him to find treasure using this stick. My personal favorite costumes were the normal square pants and the jellyfishing gear. I easily use them the most. The Mermaid Man costume was cool, but it's only required once in the entire game, so I didn't really use it very often after unlocking it. The reef blower has no use in combat, so I switched back to the square pants or jellyfishing gear whenever I wasn't required to use it. The karate gear sucks. The delay in between moves makes performing combos a slog and is basically just mashing the B button repeatedly. And the treasure hunting costume, while very basic, is okay. It gets the job done. The gameplay loop of Revenge of the Flying Dutchman is pretty simple. You go around a bunch of different locations and try to complete a set of tasks within them. These include locations from the shows such as Bikini Bottom, Sandy's Tree Dome, Downtown, Jellyfish Fields, and Goo Lagoon, as well as brand new environments created for this game, such as Chum World, a theme park created by Plankton to run the Krusty Krab out of business, and the Dutchman's Graveyard. The name is pretty self-explanatory. There are some tasks that appear in every single world, such as collecting a certain number of doubloons or jellyfish, but for the most part, every objective is unique to its respective world. Completing a task will give SpongeBob one of 9 letters that spell out his name, and upon collecting all 9 of a world's letters, the player will unlock a minigame inside of SpongeBob's brain where they have to solve a sliding puzzle under a time limit. And after doing so, they'll unlock the treasure hunting costume and use it to find one of the Dutchman's 7 treasures, personal possessions of his that he kept close to him when he was still alive, which can be used in order to defeat the Dutchman and reverse his hypnotic spell, as SpongeBob learns from an old book on evil spirits Squidward owns. Getting one of the Dutchman's treasures not only gives the player access to more areas to explore, but it also unlocks a cutscene featuring the Dutchman as he shows up to capture each of SpongeBob's friends one by one to work on his ship, starting with Gary. Now, why is the Dutchman capturing all of SpongeBob's friends when it was only Gary who dug up his treasure chest?
But that little snail feller is working out so well, and my old crew is so lazy. Can't we overlook that rule just this once?
Okay. It's a pretty fun gameplay loop. The game isn't super cryptic on what tasks you're supposed to do, and each one offers a decent challenge without being frustrating. Keep in mind though, not every task will be available at once, so don't try to get all of the letters in each area one at a time. Make sure to explore, take in the low poly sights of each world. Speaking of which, the graphics! They aren't very good, even for the time. They look much closer to the visuals of a game on the PS1 than the PS2. And even on the PS1, I don't think these visuals would be considered very impressive outside of the lighting. The environments themselves look alright, even if they do look like they'd be very unpleasant to step on. It's mainly the character models I have an issue with. Everybody besides the Dutchman and maybe Squidward look uncanny, either because they just don't look super great, like SpongeBob and Patrick, the clowns at Chum World, Rusty Scupper, or because they move around like a FNAF animatronic, like pretty much every character in the game. I'm not going to rip into the graphics too much. It probably wasn't Big Sky's fault, just another result of the game's troubled development, as well as the fact it was funded by the same publisher behind Wayne's World on the SNES. Getting back into the gameplay, let's go over each world in the game, one by one, starting with the first, Bikini Bottom. This world's unlocked from the start of the game and is where SpongeBob is able to get his trusty jellyfishing gear. It has everything you'd expect: SpongeBob's neighborhood, the Krusty Krab, the Chum Bucket. It's basically a beta version of how it is in Battle for Bikini Bottom, which is actually something you can say about a lot of the maps in Revenge of the Flying Dutchman. They feel like these weird, earlier, alternate reality versions of how they are in later SpongeBob games. The first objective the player is given is to help Patrick, who's unable to watch TV due to a rock blocking his antenna. After completing that, the player is basically allowed to do whatever they want in Bikini Bottom, completing tasks and getting a feel for how the game works. After completing all of Bikini Bottom's tasks, SpongeBob and Squidward are brought into the Krusty Krab for some unfortunate news. It's shutting down due to a lack of customers. However, SpongeBob unintentionally gives Mr. Krabs the idea of doing food deliveries in order to boost the Krusty Krab's business. An idea that Mr. Krabs gets very excited by, sending both him and SpongeBob downtown to make that cash. Downtown Bikini Bottom is comprised of 3 areas: a normal city area, a construction site, and a high-rise that's home to a bunch of sky-high apartment buildings, including the Blowhard Hotel. How did that make the final cut? All of which SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs go to, with you having to make multiple food deliveries under a time limit. It's while exploring downtown's construction site that the player unlocks the Mermaid Man costume, which must be used in order to get to the top of this building with one of the SpongeBob letters. This is the only time the costume is used in the game. It's while delivering his final order that SpongeBob comes across Patrick, who beats him to the address he was supposed to deliver to, claiming that Mr. Krabs hired him as a delivery boy. After doing some digging, SpongeBob is able to find out this isn't true, and Patrick was hired as the delivery boy for the Chum Bucket by Plankton, who's been pretending to be Mr. Krabs in order to run him out of business. A plan that SpongeBob has now foiled. Plankton then reveals his plans for Chum World before running off to Jellyfish Fields. With the Krusty Krab now saved, SpongeBob runs over to Squidward, who's been running a yard sale in order to keep the lights on. This is where SpongeBob reads the book telling him how to defeat the Dutchman, and buys a beehive thinking that it's an acorn he can give to Sandy. He meets up with her shortly after, and the two have a match of karate, serving as a tutorial for the costume. It's after winning against Sandy that the player unlocks her tree dome, which is easily the smallest world in the game. Oh, and by the way, in case you're wondering why SpongeBob is able to walk around Sandy's tree dome without a helmet, it's because there's a massive leak in her tree dome, and one of the objectives here is to fix it. It's after fixing the leak that SpongeBob gives Sandy the beehive, leading to a massive outbreak of wasps and bees in the dome, another objective we have to complete. The two partake in another round of karate, and then SpongeBob is off to the next world, Jellyfish Fields, where we meet the greatest SpongeBob character of all time, Rusty Scupper. Let's go, baby! Woo! Tougher Than Nails Scupper is running a jellyfish catching contest, with the first contestant to bring in 100 jellyfish being the winner. So, you go around Jellyfish Fields, catching any jellyfish in your sight while completing the world's many objectives. It's while completing these objectives that SpongeBob finds one of the clowns from Plankton's Chum World, who gives SpongeBob his pass to the park. After we beat the shit out of him for it. With our ticket in hand and 100 jellyfish in net, we return to supper with Scupper, who declares us the winner of the contest, with SpongeBob getting a prize of his own choice, being the reef blower I mentioned earlier. He accidentally lets upper-class Scuppers racing snails loose, and we have to use the reef blower in order to herd them back into their pen. It's basically a mini tutorial for the thing. Having gotten our park pass, it's time to run down to Chum World. The objectives are just mainly completing carnival games or just games you find at a theme park in general, such as throwing ball or using your reef blower to play a very bad game of mini golf. But there are some that stand out, such as launching yourself out of some cannons in order to get to the letter in this circus area, or just chasing after plankton for the last letter. I have more to say about Goo Lagoon though. This one uses the reef blower way more often, mainly to spin these umbrellas around. But what I want to talk about here is the characters in this world. Larry the Lobster and Rusty Scupper. Woo! Tupperware Scupper is here guarding the entrance to Goo Lagoon's pier, which gets destroyed by the Dutchman in a terrifying and adrenaline-pumping chase. But the main objective of Goo Lagoon is to stalk Larry the Lobster. That's not even the weird part of this, it's Larry himself. You see, in the show, Larry's a pretty chill guy. There's definitely been some moments where he's lost his cool, but overall, he's a pretty likable character. But for whatever reason, probably due to this game being made very early on in the series' life, Larry's characterization is completely different from the show. He's portrayed as your typical strong jock douchebag who keeps trying to blow off SpongeBob in order to not be seen around him and look cool among the other beachgoers. It's not awful, it doesn't make me hate the character or anything, it's just really weird when compared to the rest of the franchise. But why is SpongeBob even chasing after? It's his boat. He has a boat with one of the letters SpongeBob needs to stop the Dutchman. So SpongeBob keeps running after Larry, repeatedly asking him for it and annoying Larry so much that he decides to give it to SpongeBob under one condition: that he beats Larry in a karate match. They don't actually fight though, it's just a contest to see who can break the most boxes under a time limit. It's basically just a harder version of the karate matches in Sandy's Tree Dome. Not too hard though, since we easily win the match and Larry gives us the belt, having a newfound respect for Swingaling. With that, we have 6 of the 7 treasures, and it's time to find the last and defeat the Dutchman in the final world of the game, the Dutchman's Graveyard.
You don't stand a chance, SquarePants!
Damn, Dutchman's spitting some bars. The Graveyard is your standard volcano world with a bit of haunted ghost stuff sprinkled throughout. There are some of the game's normal objectives you have to complete, such as collecting a certain amount of doubloons or jellyfish, but this world has a far more linear structure to it than the others. SpongeBob comes across the Dutchman's old pirate crew, who are angry at him for never getting a fair share of the booty. By the way, this game absolutely loves saying that word, and it makes these cutscenes absolutely cursed.
Avast, matey! Who goes there? Be ye here to steal my booty?
Oh, believe me, I have no interest in touching your booty. I just want to find my friends and get them home.
Now that is one loaded booty sack. That sack was so big, I could barely get my hands around all that booty.
Okay, back on topic. The pirates want some treasure. And so in order to progress, SpongeBob must find and give them some treasure, and in return, the pirates give him access to their cannons, allowing him to travel to the next section of the area. Repeat that process until you collect all of the SpongeBob letters, and you're off to the Dutchman's ship for the final showdown. SpongeBob has to traverse the ship and get to each of his friends in order to cure them of the Dutchman's spell and send them onto a boat to escape, before coming face to face with the Dutchman, ready for the final battle. It shouldn't be too hard, right? I mean, we have all of the Dutchman's treasures now.
The book you borrowed from Squidward was not completely accurate. In fact, it was a little out of date.
Uh-oh. Frenchie isn't played by Tom Kenny in this game. Yeah, I neglected to mention that for the entire video, but I guess I have to bring it up now. The French narrator from the show is not played by Tom Kenny here, which is really weird since he does voice SpongeBob and Gary in this game. In fact, every character that isn't the narrator is played by their original voice actors, even Mr. Krabs, and that never happened back in the day. My best guess as to what happened here is that some random Big Sky employee did an impression of the narrator as some temp audio before Tom came in to record his lines as him, but they either just didn't have the time or money to bring him back in the booth again, so this is what we ended up with. I'm not finished! The final boss is stupid easy. The Dutchman and some enemies appear on screen and have some attacks you have to avoid, and when you have an opening, you throw a bomb at him. Repeat the process a couple more times, and SpongeBob is successfully able to seal the Dutchman back into his bottle, with the crew leaving to celebrate at the Krusty Krab.
Of course, you know this is coming out of your paychecks.
Let me finish! And that's Revenge of the Flying Dutchman. Is it the greatest thing in the world? No. Is it as bad as a lot of people made it out to be for a while? Also no. It might not be the most polished game ever, it might not have very good graphics for its time, it may have music that resets if you do so much as look at the game in a funny way, but I found the gameplay, well, a bit of a slog at times, to be pretty fun. And at the end of the day, that's what's most important to a game. Not its amount of polish or superficial details such as graphics or music, but the gameplay being fun. Move over, Rise of the Underminer. This is now the greatest 6 out of 10 I've ever played. I am grateful that future SpongeBob platformers would be developed by Heavy Iron Studios, but I still think that it is very unfortunate that Big Sky had to die with this game. And so early in its life too, this was only the second game they ever made. I recommend you check this out if you're a major SpongeBob guy. I think you might get a kick out of it. But that's all I have for now. Like and subscribe, and have a good one. Alright, now you can leave. Unless you want to stay for us to roast marshmallows.